Okay, so what I was going to say is, so that's some amazing work that she's been doing. Can you share a little bit of the progress in New York City? Because I would like to know a little bit more. Is it challenging? Do you see the needle moving slowly in New York City, considering some of the stuff that we've been hearing in the news?
I know. Here's New York City. New York City has been a blessing to organize in, and also sometimes difficult. And the difficulty is that we think we're the center of the world and that we know it all. And it's not that, it's just a bigger machine, and politics plays really hard. So when we started organizing in New York City, social workers were saying, like, I don't need this. I'm frontline, we're working in Bed-Stuy, we're working, we know it. So what they knew was about racism, but what they didn't know is about how do we undo racism. And getting people to understand that distinction, that this is not about racism. There are professors that could write race critical theory. They write, like, Manning Marable. He said, I know all about racism. And he says, well, what we're not doing is organizing. So all of these meetings that we have 22 monthly meetings, and that's just the Anti-Racist Alliance. We have only been organizing for 10 years, but I'll ask, do you think that this makes a difference? Legal Services in New York City is training all of their attorneys.
That's great.
Will that make a difference? You bet.
Yes, yeah.
Exactly. We, for the past 10 years, have been training students of social work, hundreds of them. Will that make a difference? You bet. How does that make a difference? Like, for instance, I'll lift a program. We have programs who were trained as social workers to go out and fix, right? Mm-hmm. But now we have social workers who understand, no, there's nothing to go out and fix. We have to be in accountable relationship with community and to understand the impact that structural racism has on the community, the trauma that it creates. And so there is no cure for this trauma because it's persistent. It's not like, rape or something. It happened and now you have to recover. When people live with persistent trauma, like, how do you begin to help people mobilize and organize in their own community to regain their own sense of humanity? So when you have people who are helpers, who don't go and blame people for their circumstances, but have an understanding that I'm looking at a circumstance and I understand the what and the why behind what I'm seeing, and that people are not responsible for the conditions of their lives, but people knowing that without being blamed and feeling ashamed can mobilize differently. So instead of saying to people, what did you do? We start out with, are you clear about what's being done here? When you walk into a decimated community and you say, these people, no. Do people understand what has been done to disempower that community? And then how do we begin to do youth development from an understanding that this has been done to me? And yeah, maybe I did something wrong, but we have to have both. Because good mental health is when we are clear about what we're seeing. So we have social workers now that are working in conjunction with communities where instead of saying, like, this is the program that we're offering, it's kind of like being in a mutual relationship. What are the services and programs that you need? And what do people need? We need jobs. We need, ACS to get off our backs. We need the police to get off, right? Mm-hmm. So it's about organizing all of that. But where we're seeing the most is around education, where when you have an anti-racist educator, the way they educate is very, very different because they speak to the what and the why behind problems. So you're teaching children how to think critically about the history books that they're reading, right? The implicit bias in the examples that are given. You have teachers who are aware. Another thing that happened is, like, for instance, Calhoun School in New York City. They received a grant They had all of their teachers trained, and they developed an anti-racist framework for curriculum development. So it's guidelines. How do you develop an anti-racist first grade curriculum? How do you develop a second grade curriculum so that the students are conscious as they're being educated? And so that's like a major experiment, right? That's like a major thing. And what they did is that they were funded, and they have a film that they created. I'm not a racist, am I? That's the title of the film. And they interviewed the students who are starting to go through these programs and the teachers. So at the end of the day, you have programs that are accountable to communities, social workers that are seeing structural racism, and understanding the what and the why behind the problems that we're seeing, so that you're not there fixing people, but you're helping people to understand the social context and to understand how they've become disempowered over time. We're looking at institutions and saying, hey, ACS and child welfare system and juvenile justice system, you've got to start turning the mirror inward and taking a look at the implicit bias that is happening in the decisions that people are making. 1,200 attorneys are being trained through, legal services. So all of these things, we feel really, really excited, when we see that people are embracing this. Another example, we have a child welfare parent group that we meet. They've all been through the Undoing Racism workshop. And in New York City, police now are putting together policies that they would get involved with the placement of children when a parent is being arrested. Well, when these parents heard about that, they're like, are you kidding me? No. There's no way that the police are going to get involved with child welfare. That's CPS. That's Administration for Children's Services. And so they started organizing and educating parents in the community. This policy cannot happen. We cannot allow this to happen because there's already a layer of oppression from the child welfare system. We cannot afford to have a second layer of oppression by the police, right? Because they're going to do a police check. And they're going to say, oh, this one's got tickets, this one's got this, and all that stuff is going to be a barrier to putting a child in an arena home with Kim. So there's so much organizing going on, and it's so exciting. We have the Undoing Racism internship project where they're organizing among the schools of social work and bringing students together, take a look at the curriculum. We have NYU that's doing tremendous work, having all of their faculty become anti-racist. The National Association of Social Workers. Last November, we had, when Trayvon Martin was murdered by Zimmerman, we were really upset because many social workers in New York City, therapists, were not asking community, how do you feel about what happened? It's almost as if that's not a part of life. And we said, we have to train people to really understand that whenever this happens, the entire community is traumatized again. It's a persistent trauma. So we called down to NASW. We put a petition together, okay? And we had people from all over the country sign this petition. And once every state had representation, we closed the petition and we brought it down to NASW, DC, and we had a conversation. And I want to be proud of my profession. What they said is, you know what we'll do? We'll have a webinar where you can talk to the members of your association about structural racism. We'll have a think tank on racism, and then we'll take it to Capitol Hill. And that's what we did. We had a think tank last November, 65 race equity experts from around the country, not just social workers, police, healthcare, other professions came to talk about establishing a common definition of racism, establishing race competencies. And then we took this briefing to Capitol Hill where Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who is the head of the Social Work Caucus, heard us. And she supports the idea that we have to establish race competencies for the profession. So all of those are stepping stones, but they're monumental. They're monumental. And I just say that I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope when Eric Garner, that unfortunate killing of Eric Garner in Staten Island, and all the people that came out, and Ferguson, you know, and on the 15th, 16th, and 17th of this month, they're holding another rally. We're not backing off now.
No, that's right.
Right?
You mentioned that New York, we do think, we have a sense that we know it all, but it seems like you guys have been making some significant change, even though it may be incremental, but nonetheless it's change.
Concrete.
Yes, exactly. So we talked a little bit about the police department.
Yes.
What do you think, what's your opinion on like the stop and frisk type of policies that happen today and how that impacting the communities?
Right. Listen, my understanding has been profoundly impacted by Michelle Alexander's work. Michelle Alexander wrote The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. And I really feel that everybody should read this book. The Anti-Racist Alliance in Westchester, during the month of March, we held 9 community read-in discussions on this book. And because you have to know what she says. So what she said is that a caste system was started with the Jim Crow, where there was a group of people who were permanently placed banned outside of society's benefits, right? Couldn't vote, couldn't get a license. I mean, the new Jim Crow. And what she says is that in this country,